Alright guys, I'm going to show you how to make an eyeball, kind of naturalistic or realistic eyeball in clay. So I have, let's say this is my face that I'm sculpting. I'm going to use a loop tool to carve out basically an eye socket. And I'm going to try and do two. I'd say the hardest part about doing a naturalistic eyeball is the fact that you've got to make them symmetrical or even. That is, in my humble opinion, the most challenging thing. So we have basically our two eye sockets. Again, you're trying to get them even in terms of depth and width. And that is the hardest part. So we have our two things, and now we're going to make an eyeball. And how I usually kind of go about this is I take a ball of clay and I try and get it as balled up and even as I can. And then I cut it in half as evenly as I can. And I can already tell this one's a little bit bigger. I didn't do a very good job, so I'm going to take a little bit away from the one that's a tiny bit bigger. And now we get to play that game for a little while, is getting these two balls even. And I mean, not terrible, not terrible. Alrighty. I think this is more... I could still take a little bit off. And it's easier to take away than add, so again. Anything, this one might now be a little bit bigger than this one. Whoops. But I'm going to just stick with it. Let's say I got it finally to where they were the same size. Basically, we're going to put our eyeballs in our eye sockets. And since you are adding this clay, you do need to make sure that you go ahead and score and slip it. Score, score, score. Now I'm going to slip. And I am rushing a little bit because I know this is difficult for some of you to watch and pay attention to. Whoop. Score again, because we just erased so many of those score marks. Score, 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 score. Score. Alright. Now I'm going to pop that eyeball in there. And he is glued in. Same with the second one. Glued in. And now we're going to make eyelids. The way I make eyelids is two little baby coils. And in fact, I'm going to get a little more than that. I'm going to make one baby coil and then I'm going to cut it in half. Again, just to kind of help with that even, trying to get things even. And this one is not really, here we go. I'm going to twist him a little, and that just helps get him to be round. Okay, so now I have my eyelids. I'm going to do my best to cut it down the middle. We saw what happened last time. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of taper each end, see if I need any water on there. this become that top eyelid. So one thing I tend to do after I have my little coils is I will flatten them out a little bit. If you have some kind of little rolling device, you can use a pencil. Just a little bit. And then that's going to become the top eyelid. And this one needs a little bit of water. Yeah, one of them I gave water to and the other one I didn't. Look what happened. Okay. Remember, unless you want crazy eyes, you kind of do have to cover at least that top quarter of your eyelid. And then now the trimming happens. And this is really plastic clay, which is fabulous. So I'm not going to score and slip the eyelids because they're so fragile. Sometimes when you have very plastic clay, welding is enough. And unless I'm working really quite large, like if I'm wanting to make a bust or something, I usually use tools when I'm making eyes. And I'll also be real with you, it's been a really long time since I've made a bust. Or anything that's like close to life size in clay. But I have done that. I have had that experience before in my life. And it's actually a lot easier. Sometimes working small is not quite as easy. Alright, so there we go. Now we have our top lids. Now we're going to do the same thing to make our bottom lids. And these are going to be a little bit thinner. And I may have just made it too thin. We will see. Sometimes it takes a couple tries. It's not an exact science, it is an art. See if they kind of match up and look somewhat even. And I think I have done these very close together since I was just doing them in a flat block of clay. If you're trying to sculpt like a realistic face, there's a lot more going, topography. It's not totally flat. And do clean off your tools. As you work, it's helpful. There we go. And I would even say that I feel like my top lid is maybe a little thick. I might come in and make it a little bit thinner here. Another thing you're gonna probably want to do, and you can do this pre or post the eyelid, but if you just go ahead and give yourself a pupil in there, that shadow really helps out. Let's say it's a real sculpture, like I'm just kind of playing around here. I would poke it all the way through to the inside where it's hollow, because you had to hollow it out because if it's thicker than your thumb, well, my friend, it has the probability of having air bubbles and will most likely explode, and we don't want that. So, but you can see, oh, dropped a tiny piece of clay in there, how we could get some eyebrows in there, get them real expressive. And there would be, again, if this was an actual sculpture, I would have a lot more depth going on, particularly in here, in between the lid and the brow bone. And then we'd have our nose coming out. And the brow itself would come out this way. Oops. So there's a couple different types of sculpting. There's additive and subtractive sculpting, and as you can see, I'm using the loop tool, which, yes, is just a simple paper clip that I opened up, and I am removing clay. That is taking away the clay to create different topographies in the surface. That is subtractive sculpting. Anytime I add, like now I'm adding the eyebrow, and it really would have been best practice for me to have scored and slipped the eyebrows. But when I added the eyebrow, that is a form of additive sculpting. Here I'm adding texture. So as you're working and as you're using your critical thinking skills, consider, what can I add, what can I take away to make this the best sculpture I can. So I added a nose, I took away masses from underneath the eyes, I added bags under the eyes, I added some lips, and I was like, oh man, I need more space. So I added a chin, then I added the lips underneath it, and so forth. So think about how you're adding and taking away as you sculpt. Remember, you don't want it to be any thicker than your thumb.